So my name is Tom Perez. I'm an police officer with Menifee Police Department. Been here since the inaugural July 1, one of the founding members, and prior to this I did 9 years at Cal State Fulton Police Department. On 9/11 I was in Scottsdale, Arizona. I received a phone call from my mom early in the morning and woke me up, and I could just hear her crying. And I knew it was a different cry, and I immediately thought, oh, something happened to my sister or my dad. It didn't sound good. She couldn't get a lot out, and all I could hear was, turn on the TV. And I turned it on, and both towers had already been hit at that point. And I remember I just felt sick to my stomach. I grew up in New York. My parents were still in New York. My dad was one of the big dogs at Kennedy Airport during 9/11, and just seeing what he went through afterwards. And my sister had a prom there. I had numerous field trips there as a kid to the World Trade Center, and it was just sickening, just glued to the TV for hours. And when those towers fell, that's like the one of the crappiest I've ever felt. It was just a pit in my stomach. And because of that, it turned me on to law enforcement, and I wanted to go out and do something to make a difference. And I said I was either going to join the military or become a cop. So a couple months after 9/11 happened, I went back home, flew back home for Thanksgiving, end of November. And I told my mom I wanted to go down there and check out the site. You couldn't get super close at that point. Most of the debris was still there. The cleanup was at a minimal 2.5 months later. And they had wood walls surrounding most of the area. And me and my mom, we signed the wall, and it was just a humbling experience to go down there and to see what was going on. And people were still walking around, handing out flyers. Have you seen my dad? 2.5 months later, just people just still holding on to hope, and just seeing everything. For some people, reality still hadn't set in for them. It was just too overwhelming for them to face the reality and grasp what really happened. I mean, most people watch it on TV, but to go down there and to see the sheer size and destruction, not only the Twin Towers, but of the immediate area around it, was just full, complete destruction. So after it, I think the country in whole, not just in New York, but everybody came together like I've never seen before. Probably the complete opposite about what we're going through today. I remember I had to work that night and the next couple nights, and I remember George Bush came on, and everybody was still traumatized. Like, what the heck just happened? The whole country's trying to process what just happened. And I worked at a sports bar as the bar manager, and we had no sports on. The bar was packed, and it was tuned into President Bush's speech. Then in the middle of it, or at the end of it, everybody kept saying, USA, USA. And it was just got chills in the back of your neck, and it was just overwhelming with like American pride. Like, we gotta go out and do something. Not just me, but like everybody's like, we gotta do something. We have to respond. We can't let this happen. And the whole thing just didn't feel right. It just didn't sit right. I mean, obviously 3,000 people lost their lives, but just watching it on TV, and you just see these people just jumping out of the building, and like that's their only option. There's no other option than to jump. And you're looking at it on TV, and it's surreal. And you're like, this little speck is falling on a screen, and you're like, that's a human being with family. And you listen to these phone calls and voicemails people were leaving from the plane, saying goodbye to their family, and just the terror that some people that were a part of it felt. It's just disgusting and overwhelming. And it was good to see American pride, and it's good. I'm glad to see that we did something about it. Even though it was 20 years ago, I mean, I remember everything. I remember who I was with, where I watched it, what couch I was on. You see a lot of young people who haven't experienced it, or who were very young when it happened, and they think maybe it was a conspiracy, and it was a government setup, or it didn't really happen. And I can tell you it did. I know people that perished. We had a couple firefighters from my town in New York that perished, and still to this day they light hand candle memorials every night for those lost souls. So I love watching them. I remember like it was yesterday. I like to see other people's perspective, especially for those that survived it and those that went through it. And you see that in some of these videos, and it's just very strong, and it just allows us to remember what really happened. I remember when even before that, my parents would say, I remember where I was when JFK got shot. And I was like, what? That was like 25, 30 years ago. Like, who remembers? And then now here we are, fast forward 20 years later, and I remember exactly where I was. My main drive for becoming a police officer was 9/11. Like I said, I was either going to go in the military or law enforcement. And I had always had an interest in law enforcement. I'm not saying I wouldn't be here without 9/11, but I'm not saying I would be here without it either. So, yeah, I think that was my driving force and my motivation. And, you know, when I used to apply for departments and not get it, and you were just discouraged about trying to get into law enforcement, that was my motivation, just to remember that there were some people there that needed help and couldn't get that help on 9/11, and I just always wanted to help people that just couldn't help themselves.